Hi, welcome back to Logic. I'm Tom, and in this unit, we will launch out into talking about a formal system of logic, which is called propositional logic. And we'll start evaluating different logical connectives. So, excuse me, just a second there. As I mentioned, we are doing propositional logic, which is logic that deals with how we connect entire propositions, right? There are different logical languages, and there are different degrees in which you break down sentences and language. And propositional logic is probably the simplest one or the broadest one. A proposition is what we've already been talking about in terms of arguments. It is a statement that is truth valuable, right? I went to the store. That's a statement. It's true if I went to the store. It's false if I didn't, right? It's truth valuable. These kinds of propositions, something very simple like that, is called an atomic proposition, okay? So here's an example. Climate change is a pressing problem, right? It says something about climate change, and you can't break down that sentence any smaller in order and still have it be truth valuable, right? If I just say climate change, that's not a proposition. If I just say is a pressing problem, that's not a proposition either. That's not truth valuable. It's just part of a thought, right? So now, when it comes to propositional logic, we deal with not just atomic propositions, but complex propositions. So here's an example of a complex proposition. Climate change is a pressing problem and people should recycle, right? There are two individual truth valuable statements and they're connected by that word and, right, which is called a conjunction. Another example here is if climate change is a pressing problem, then people should recycle, right? The connection there is what we call a conditional, right? And that's a slightly different statement than the first. Has the same atomic propositions in it, but different logical connectives, right? Um, now, logical connectives are important because they put different constraints on the truth value of a complex proposition, right? So we'll be going through logical connectives very slowly. I think we do like one each unit, each module. So it gives you a chance to do some exercises with each one and kind of slowly take them up, right? And we're also dealing with a formal system. So with every connective, there will be a certain kind of symbol for how to represent it. We'll be translating, looking at sentences, and then using letters, usually just capital letters, to represent those atomic propositions. And then we'll use different symbols to represent the connectives themselves. So if you notice in this unit, there is a dot that represents and, because we focus on conjunction for this unit. And we start kind of slow. Conjunction is kind of the easiest one, and then move forward and take them all in turn. So as I've mentioned, examples of logical connectives are and, which is conjunction. It can also be represented in what we call natural language with but or although, certain other phrases. They give a list of them in our book. There's also disjunction, which is or, either or statements. And if then statements, which are conditionals. That's another logical connective. And also not, which is negation connective. And we'll go through all these slowly, like I said. It is easy to look at a bunch of symbols on a page and have a little bit of anxiety. That's kind of normal. So if you experience that going through the exercises or looking at parts of the reading, don't worry about it. Just do your best and move forward, and it tends to sink in over time. So let's look at let's focus on conjunction for a minute. There's another video that's not my video that's also very helpful for this unit. But let's just go over the basics of what conjunction is and how it works, right? So the example we gave was that climate change is a pressing problem and people should recycle, right? That has two atomic propositions. Climate change is a pressing problem and people should recycle. Um, and A conjunction, the and says that both of those statements are true and they're both true independently, right? So that's the force of using and to say that this is true and this is true, right? And so that means from that you can infer either proposition independently. Very simply, when you look at this in terms of um, the formal language, you'd represent this as like A and B, right? A dot B. And then from that, you can infer A, or you can just infer B in isolation, right? Now that's, and just intuitively, if you think about that statement, climate change is a pressing problem and people should recycle, it's different from the second one. Um, the second one is if climate change is a pressing problem, then people should recycle. Um, Notice that on the second one, the conditional, if it turns out that climate change is not a pressing problem, then it doesn't follow that people should recycle according to that statement, right? It wouldn't follow. That conditional would not hold because the second statement is conditional um, on the first one being true, right? Um, and one could reject this conditional, right, and say that, well, yeah, climate change is a pressing problem, but I don't think that it follows from that we should recycle because recycling is not really that effective of a means to combat climate change or something like this, right? So the conditional has a different kind of function and kind of different kind of relation between the two atomic sentences there. Um, so um, as I said, the conjunction is very straightforward. So consider the following example: my shirt is blue and it's long sleeved. Then it follows that my shirt is blue. It also follows that my shirt is long sleeved, and that's very simple. It's something that we tend is kind of inference that we make almost subconsciously all the time, but it is important. And with the homework, there is a further distinction that they make there between what they call truth functional conjuncts and non-truth functional conjuncts, right? So a truth functional conjunct is a complex proposition where the truth value of each of the atomic propositions is independent from the other. So when I say my shirt is blue and my shirt is long sleeved, those things are separate from each other, right? My shirt could be red and long sleeved. My shirt could be short sleeved and blue, right? These things are independent from one another, and my conjunctive statement does not maintains that the truth value of each of these is separate, right? So, but not all conjunctive statements function this way, right? Sometimes we use a conjunctive statement um, to talk about a relationship that is reciprocal or codependent in some way. So, for example, consider the following example: Harry and Sam love each other, right? Um, that functions a little bit differently because while it does follow that Harry loves Sam, and it also follows that Sam loves Harry, those have slightly different meaning, right? So if Harry loves Sam, then that could be true, and because in a different way than in the original statement, because Harry could be Sam's stalker or something like this, right? In the case that Sam does not love Harry, that has a different connotation than the idea that Harry and Sam love each other, right? So that conjunct is a little bit different. But also, this is more explicit in other kinds of relationships, like Harry and Sam are married, right? Now, it does follow that Harry is married to Sam, and it does follow that Sam is married to Harry. However, those things have to be true together, right? Harry cannot be married to Sam without Sam being married to Harry, right? So that original conjunct, Harry and Sam are married, is what the author of our textbook would say is non-truth functional. It's not the greatest term, but it's the idea that you cannot make the kind of inferences in our formal language with those kinds of conjuncts that you can with other ones. Like my statement about my shirt being blue and long sleeved, right? So that's just to help us be aware of the logical function of a conjunct. And that's why they do that in our exercise. So be aware of that. Make sure you pay attention to that in the reading selection. And the book is pretty clear about all these things. The formal language stuff is pretty good. And so that's why I've selected it. So just take your time, go through it, watch this video and the other one, and we'll be taking this slow. And that's it for this unit. I will be seeing you all shortly. Talk more about connectives.